If you're a guest with us this morning, my name is Dwight. I'm one of the I don't know, pastors or teachers or whatever. I'm one of the elders. That's the spiritual term. That's the religious word. And I get to preach this morning or talk to you about the Sermon on the Mount. It's a series that we're doing about the greatest message ever told. It's the message that changes everything. It's the first real collection of teachings of Jesus the Christ. It's recorded in Matthew 5 and 6 and might spill over into chapter 7. But it's one of those messages that we often have bits and pieces of. We think of bits and pieces, and the familiarity can sometimes rob us of the beauty of it. And so one of the great things that we want to accomplish in this sermon series is to try to remind you of just how beautiful Jesus' first teachings were. And so this morning, we're going to tackle a portion of the Sermon on the Mount called the Beatitudes. The Beatitudes. Any of you know what Beatitudes, where the word comes from? Anybody want to shout out, even from my basic Christian beliefs group last Sunday night? Refers to the word blessing. Blessing. It comes from the Latin for blessing, and it seems to make sense, doesn't it? Because Jesus just has this whole list. Blessed is, blessed are you, blessed are you, blessed are you. So I thought it'd be appropriate for us to stand and read the Beatitudes together this morning, if you would. So why don't you stand with me, and we're going to find my remote. Man, I'm losing track of everything. If you can see the words, can we read in unison together today? Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. You may be seated. If you didn't think Jesus was crazy, if you were part of the original crowd on that mountainside or that little plateau that day, you would certainly think Jesus was crazy now. What countercultural stuff Jesus is saying on this afternoon? Blessed are you if you're persecuted. He goes on to say, thank God if you're persecuted because of righteousness. This guy must be crazy. He must have absolutely lost his mind. This is the message of Jesus. Today, as we talk about the blessings, we need to recognize that there are a few problems with the Beatitudes. One is that we're so familiar with them that we forget just who Jesus was speaking with. And we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. There's other problems with the Sermon on the Mount. This is not a typical 3-point sermon. It doesn't end with a poem. It doesn't have a lot of personal illustrations. It seems to be this smattering of moral teachings. And in fact, many people who don't really want you to follow Jesus, they just want you to love him, would actually lift out portions of this and say, this is what Jesus was about. But there's so much more than this in Jesus. As you know, Jesus is easy to love, but he's hard to follow. And he gives us a hint of this now. Now, if you remember last week, we said the number one rule of Bible study is what? You sound so excited. The number one rule of Bible study is context, context, context. And so Jesus has just started his ministry. He's just started recruiting disciples. He's been healing people. And all of a sudden, he just randomly goes up onto this mountainside and sits down and starts to teach. The problem with the Beatitudes is they're not how to influence friends, how to make friends and influence people. These are things that are very difficult to measure. How do you measure if you're poor of spirit or not? What's the scale by which I measure my mourning or my grief? Do I qualify to receive the kingdom of heaven? Do I qualify for comfort? Where is the scale, Jesus? It seems awfully vague. And so this morning we fully acknowledge that there will be some familiar and some new. There will be offense and there will be comfort, and I hope you find that today. The familiar are this. These ideas are nothing new for any of us who have walked with Jesus for any amount of time. You didn't read anything new up there this morning, did you? We're really hungry for new things. We're hungry for this creative revelation from God, but sometimes Jesus comes to you and says, just be merciful. Just be kind. Be compassionate. It's pretty profound, isn't it? It's a surprise to me, a welcome surprise, when I go to stores and I see signs on the door that say, you know, if you want to wear a mask in this place, they are more than welcome. No, I'm not getting into the politics. I'm just saying, yeah, it's okay. If you want to be kind to one another, please do so. If you want to love one another, that's a great idea too. If you want to be kind, if you want to be loving, Jesus does not tell us anything new in this portion of Scripture. The inspiration was to glorify God, and the format was exceedingly familiar. Let me ask you, who was Jesus talking to? Who was Jesus talking to in Matthew 5? I heard it. The disciples. The disciples. Now, who are disciples? Followers of Jesus. And who would the disciples have been then? It wasn't the 12. The 12 weren't really assembled until chapter 10, chronologically speaking. All we have right now is the 4 that were mentioned. They were both 2 pairs of brothers that were fishing. One pair left their father in the boat. The other pair were just mending their nets. That's all we know as far as the 12 being included here. Matthew is so generous in chapter 4 that he tells us who the crowd were. He tells us who were following. And they were a ragtag, shoddy crowd, ladies and gentlemen. They were demon-possessed folks. They were sick. They were outcasts. And in Roman-ruled Israel at the time, there weren't many favors being extended to you. Now, Rome did a lot of good things, but it was an incredibly cutthroat society. There wasn't justice for the poor. There wasn't mercy and compassion. There was slavery. There was rule of law. There was absolute authority of the Roman people. But if you were sick, if you were demon-possessed, if you were unpopular, if you were unwell, then you were the ones that Jesus was speaking to. Can any of you relate? I've often read the Beatitudes like, if only I could be that. If only I could be poor in spirit. Maybe I'm not poor in spirit enough. If only I could be this. If only I could be a peacemaker instead of a fighter. I'm a fighter. In fact, I'll create fights for somebody else. Some of you parents know this. I will give your children candy late at night just to say, now eat that before bed. I'm a terrible human being. I will create mischief. And I read this portion of Scripture as if it were some sort of checklist that Jesus is giving to us. If you are this way, then you will be blessed. But Jesus is sitting down and he's starting a conversation with this ragtag group of, it's just, well, they're societal trash. And how does he start? By blessing them. He looks at one person and says, you're blessed because you're merciful. He looks at another and he said, you're blessed because you're grieving. He looks at another and he says, you're blessed because you're a peacemaker. And he starts his message. Now he's been traveling and he's been taking out evil from people. He's been taking out illness. He's been taking out suffering. He's been taking out disease. He's been taking out demons. He's done taking out, and now he starts this incredible sermon by putting in. And he starts by blessing. Not me. Not saying, Dwight Ingersoll, in 2023, if you only get kinder or lovelier or cleaner, then maybe you'll attain these promises. No, he starts the sermon by saying, blessed are you. Now, we know this now as popular pop psychology or positive affirmation. How much more successful we will be if we have a difficult truth to tell someone. How much easier it will be if we start with a word of blessing or encouragement, right? If we have a breakup, it's not you, it's me. If we have discipline for our children, you are good at this, you're great at that, you're awesome at this. Now, you're a doughhead at that, smarten up! Or that's the theory. In church discipline, we approach it from the very same way. You are gifted, you are good, you are this, you are that. Culturally, First Nations or Aboriginal communities, they will gather around when somebody has broken the mores or the values of the laws, and especially with their young men, they will gather them in the circle, and around the circle, all of the elders of the group will bless and bless and bless, essentially saying, you are better than this. You are better than the society says you are, so now you can live up to who you are. Be who you are called to be. And is that not the message of the kingdom? We read that Jesus, in chapter 4, started preaching, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near. And this first beatitude says, the kingdom of heaven belongs to you. The kingdom of heaven is not some revolutionary new thing. The kingdom of heaven is, here's who you were designed to be. Now live up to it. So in other words, when we live rightly or righteously, we are not living abnormally or strangely. We are getting back in connection with who God designed us to be at the very beginning. We are being taken back to Eden. We are blessed. Now the early hearers would have thought when Jesus started saying, blessed is, or blessed are you, they would have thought this was going to be another Jewish prayer. That's the only thing that probably drew these folks together, or they were probably almost all Jews. They were probably, from the list of countries and regions that Matthew says, the Hebrews, the Jews, they prayed all the time. And they prayed starting with a particular phrase, Baruch atah Adonai, blessed are you, Lord God. In fact, I'm going to read to you a short version of just what they pray over their Sabbath meal. Are you ready? Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who made us holy with his commandments and told us to light the Sabbath lights. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us fruit from the vine. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us bread from earth. Baruch atah Adonai Eliyahu melech Elohim. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe. And that's just one of their prayers. There are literally hundreds of their prayers that this group that were around during Moses' time, the Great Assembly they're called, they wrote and they passed these prayers down. They were members of the Sanhedrin, actually. They passed these prayers down so that the people were always saying, blessed are you, ... Lord our God. These people had never had anybody say, no, blessed are you. In fact, the society was saying, no, you are trash. Jesus, in sitting down and praying in this format, really was the first to say one man's trash is the kingdom's treasure. We could stop right there this morning. That is the good news. Every one of us has something that makes us feel inferior. Every one of us. I could go around this room by name. I know almost all of you by name, and there's something that every one of you could make me feel inferior about. If you know how to swim, I'm inferior. If you know how to skate, I'm inferior. If you can slam dunk a basketball, I'm inferior. If you can dribble a basketball, I'm inferior. The list goes on and on and on. Your house might be nicer. Your car might be cleaner. Your speech might be better. The list goes on and on if we choose to live this way. And that was the society to which Jesus was speaking. And it's the society he continues to speak to today. Every one of us has something that might make us feel like trash. In fact, even in church, have you ever felt it where you've gone to church and you've seen some super spiritual person? I can say this because they're not here. Chad and Nancy Stretch. Aren't they the most godly folk on the face of the earth? They're amazing. But Jesus looks at you and me and says, oh no, don't you dare feel inferior to Chad and Nancy Stretch. Blessed are you because I say so. Are you with me? We're still friends? All right. Let's continue on then, because if we weren't friends, I'd just walk out and escape. So why did Jesus start this message with all these blessings? Why didn't he just at the end draw it nice and tightly to a close with all these blessings? Now that I've taught you that you're salt and light, now that I've taught you what it looks like to follow me and to be part of this kingdom that I'm establishing here on earth, now that I've done that, now let me bless you, we'll pray, and maybe receive an offering. No, he started this because of the very nature of a blessing. Blessings biblically and even today do three things. Blessings bring a satisfaction. So much so that in the New Testament, usually almost every time the word blessing is used, it's used to bring satisfaction. Isn't that amazing? If I knew Greek, I'd pronounce the Greek word to you that is interchangeable, but it simply means this. The Greek word translated blessed in most of the New Testament passages means to be fully satisfied. It refers to those receiving God's favor regardless of their circumstances. To bring satisfaction. The Levite, because he has no portion or inheritance. This is from Deuteronomy, one of the commands of God. Among you, and the alien, the orphan, and the widow who are in your town shall come and eat and be satisfied, in order that what the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hand which you do. Notice the tie there? They may come and eat and be what? Satisfied, so that you may be blessed. Over and over and over again, there's a tie between satisfaction and blessing. Jesus himself, with the woman at the well, would say, isn't it ironic that you will come to this well in the heat of the day because you're ashamed, you're the outcast, you're the societal trash, just to get water, and tomorrow you're going to have to do it all over again. I tell you, a day is coming when you will have this water and you will be fully satisfied. Did he promise that she'd no longer have shame? Did he promise that people wouldn't bully her anymore? No, but within the circumstance, she would experience satisfaction. I am the bread of life, he said. If you eat of me, you will never go hungry. There's a tie between blessing and being fully satisfied. These people to whom testing one, there we go. See, I wasn't satisfied there for a moment. These people were not satisfied. They were in a terrible predicament, and Jesus offered them something that the Romans refused to do. The church, that early day of synagogue worship, couldn't do. Jesus started by saying, it is humanly possible to walk satisfied regardless of your circumstance. Isn't that wonderful news? Oh, it ties all of these Beatitudes together. There's satisfaction for the broken. There's satisfaction for the weary, even in the middle of our trials. Here's the second thing, blessing empowers. Blessing empowers. Think of the Old Testament. Think of Genesis chapter 1. God blessed Adam and Eve in the garden. He blessed them and he said, be fruitful and multiply and rule over the planet. God gave them a measure of authority with his blessing. And don't we do that for our children, those who are under our care? For those of you who are employers, don't we do that for our employees as we bless them and we affirm them? Not to stay where they are, not to say you're good, just stay under that glass ceiling forever, but to call out the goodness in those who are under our care. Elders of the church, same for us. To call out the goodness is very, very empowering. It's not the only time. In Genesis chapter 27, we see empowerment as well with Jacob and Esau fighting for the blessing from their father Isaac. Jacob loses his blessing and he goes to his dad and he says, don't you have any blessing left for me? And he didn't. And yet, in Genesis 32, Jacob wrestles with God. Why does he wrestle with God? Why does he hold on? He says, I need you to bless me. God did bless him. And God did say, your name is no longer Jacob. It will now be Israel, the one who wrestles or contends with God and wins. See, Jesus doesn't set the bar low for us. You read the Beatitudes this afternoon and you will find that these things are incredibly challenging. These are postures that we don't typically want in our humanity, and yet it's incredibly, incredibly empowering to be blessed. And finally, here's where I think we are today, ladies and gentlemen. Blessing identifies us. Jesus was in essence saying, you might not be Romans people. And you might not be the synagogue's people because you're unclean, you're unworthy, you're diseased, you're divorced, you're sinful, you're dirty, whatever. Jesus says, I can identify with you. And you can identify with me. We are one another's people. This is why the church is often referred to as the bride of Christ. We belong to him, and he belongs to us. But this isn't unique just to church history. Jacob, as I already stated in Genesis 32, was not just rewarded with this fluffy, everything's going to be all right blessing. It was, no, I am going to bless you with a new name and a new identification. In the Gospels of Matthew chapter 16, we see Peter answering the question Jesus asks, who do people say that I am, and who do you say that I am? Peter says, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. How does Jesus respond? These are words above your pay grade, dude. These are words of God, and I now call you Peter, the rock on which I will build my church. There's a new identity through the blessing. Saul, in the early portions of Acts, is going from city to city, house church to house church, persecuting these followers of Jesus. He's on the road to Damascus, and this bright light blinds him. And through a whole series of events, through 3 chapters in the book of Acts, he goes from Saul, the one who persecutes the church, to Paul, the evangelist to the Gentiles. A new name, a new identity, a new blessing. Have I ever reminded you that Jesus is always the smartest one in the room? Jesus knew exactly what he was doing by starting this sermon by blessing. Jesus was identifying whose we are and who we are before he ever gets into the weeds of how now we should live. And this is something I think the North American church has done backwards. I want to be very, very cautious here. because some of you have received a great deal from various church backgrounds. Your heritage has been a great gift, but some of you, you've at least heard the stories of this script getting flipped. Well, if I stop doing this and stop doing that and stop doing something else, then maybe I could be included with God. Instead of, God has created me with destiny and purpose. God has put a calling on my life. Now I'd better figure it out. Jesus and I had better get in a room together, and we had better find peace, he and I. At the end of the day, he had better be the only one on the throne of my heart, or else there's no way in the world I can live up to the blessing that I've just received. Now, ladies and gentlemen, every one of you are postured to receive the very same blessing that trash on the hillside was receiving from Jesus. Remember, Jesus was declaring, the world's trash is my what? Treasure. You are my treasure. Now he will get into, how do you start living like it? Historically, we've done a really lousy job, and I confess, as a pastor, I've been part of what's called a holiness denomination for many, many years. And so many times I've looked at people and I've picked and chosen out of the crowd their potential, their potential, their potential, their potential. Even when Jesus has just been so busy performing miracles, casting demons, cleaning up, making crooked paths straight, straightening out people's lives, and I still, in my humanity, I'm so guilty of saying, I'm going to invest in them. When Jesus just throws the paint against the whole wall and says, I'm going to invest in all of y'all. You think you're trash? You're treasure. You think you're ruined? You're treasure. You think you're disqualified? You're treasure. You think you are. So might I encourage you today to take these words to heart? Might I encourage you to ask yourself a couple of questions. Number one, what does Jesus think about? Or what does Jesus see when he sees me? I know I see myself as an absolute mess, you might say. Dwight, I haven't read the Beatitudes since last Sunday. I haven't read my Bible since last Sunday. Now, don't be fooled. I'm not saying that's okay. Jesus is not saying it's okay. Jesus is saying, I welcome you in. You might be saying, Dwight, if you knew how, I can't count how many times I've cussed this week. I can't tell you how much road rage I've had this week. Dwight, I hated somebody this week. All of these things. And Jesus simply sits down and says, oh, my disciple, my follower, you are blessed. Now let me tell you how to live up to that. What does Jesus think about when he thinks about you? Secondly, what does it mean to be blessed by God? Some of y'all in a moment are going to be tempted to pray for certain things that are part of your situation right now. Going to be praying for financial things, and you should. You're going to be praying for health things, and you should. You're going to be praying for relationships, for friends and loved ones who don't know you, maybe even political things. You should, and you should. But based on the Beatitudes, is it not healthy to understand as a foundation that regardless of my circumstance, it's possible for me to be entirely satisfied with God? God might answer miraculously, and he can. God might give you a revelation or an answer, and he may. But even if he doesn't, even if he won't, we can be satisfied as his disciple.